Hey guys, it's Barrett with the Gimpy Camper. So in this video, I'm going to go over some tips and tricks, some common hacks that I've come up with and found out over winterizing your camper that I've learned over the last 3 years. You know, I do this probably more than most people, as I winterize usually a couple of times a month. You know, here in Tennessee, the weather's not that bad in the winter, so a lot of times, you know, it does get down to freezing. But I still like to camp in the wintertime. We don't have much snow here. So I'll winterize. We'll go on a camping trip for the weekend, so I'll de-winterize and then we'll winterize again. You know, some people just use their camper still, but they don't use the water system or anything. For me, it takes 10 minutes to winterize. It's easy. You have a lot more functionality. You can use it like normal. And so I always just go ahead and just do the whole shebang. But because of that, I do tend to winterize more than a lot of people, and I think I may have picked up some tips that you might have not seen before. Now, our particular tips and hacks, they're all going to use compressed air, and so we're going to go over all the tips, tricks, and hacks that we found in order to save you time, frustration, energy, maybe even a little bit of money on your wintering adventures. So stay tuned, and we're going to go over all that right after this. Hey guys, are you wondering what the absolute best way to winterize your camper with air is? Well, after a few different systems, I believe that I've finally found the secret to get the absolute best winterizing method with compressed air. In our original video that's got over 50,000 views, I went over and informed you that, that I winterize the camper twice a month. Been doing that for a while, and I was honest with you guys, and I told you that there was a weak link with the whole compressed air method, and that weak link is going to be in the water pump, because you get those blowout plugs. In traditional teaching, tells you to put them in the city water inlet. You blow it out, but it doesn't get any water out of the pump there. But I'm going to tell you how to work around that today. So I'm going to say that I didn't think that winterizing the pump was that big of a deal, because it doesn't get too cold here. I do have some insulation in my underbelly, and I just felt like it worked just fine. And so that's what I did for a year or so. But I will say that after a couple of years, that I had some micro cracks in that pre-filter of the sure-floe water filter that goes into the pump. And I found this out when I installed the Lippert Floe last year. And what the Lippert Floe is it's essentially a dedicated air compressor that's mounted in the camper in order to blow out the water lines in the RV. It does make the process easier because you don't have to worry about making any connections or the pressure being too high on the air compressor or anything like that. It's always hooked up, it's always ready to go. And I think they have it set around 15 psi, which I wish that was bumped up a little bit because it is a little bit of a pain. But I'm going to tell you that the magic of this machine for me, though, is that it connects to the system before the water pump, and then evacuates the water from the pump too. So, in my opinion, there are only a couple of negative aspects about the system. The first is the compressor inside the unit, and you don't want to leave it turned on for a long period of time because it just won't handle the abuse. And so, technically, I say if you're going to use that system, it's better to drain the kitchen sink and then go do something else, and a few minutes later drain the bathroom sink, and then a few minutes later, because you don't want to overwork the compressor, because it's not going to take a lot of abuse like that. The second drawback to that system is the price. A lot of people that would find the convenience of the system may have a hard time spending more money for it than a compressor that you can use for multiple things, or already have a compressor that you want to use and be able to save the money to start with. So I'd actually sent Lippert a message stating that it would be a great option if they just had a way where they could just make a kit without the compressor where you could hook it up just like that. And then it just hit me one day, just like bam. The best way to winterize with air, it just popped in my head. In a lot of campers out there, there's already a connection to actually accomplish this. Traditionally, like I said, it's taught that you put that blowout plug in your city water connection. Well, in my Cougar wet bay, there is a hose inlet already that's labeled Winterize. Now if you don't have one of these, you might have to put like a winterized kit in on your pump, so that way you have a hose and a cutoff valve that goes to it. But in a lot of fifth wheels, you're already going to have a wet bay, you're already going to have a winterized outlet, and it's going to do the same exact thing for you as far as putting that air in before the pump. That's probably the biggest tidbit that I'm going to give you here, is getting that air in before the pump. And if you have a RV winterize hose inlet, then that's going to do it for you. And I'm going to go over exactly all the steps to this at the end of the video, but we're going to go through this like piece by piece to start with, okay? Now that RV inlet, I've only used it one time before, and that was to try to use it with RV antifreeze the very first time that I did this, and I couldn't get the pump to siphon it actually. But from what I understand, it helps if you hold that antifreeze up, you know, above the level. Even though that it's there, I just thought that it would have enough power just to pull it up out of there, but apparently it doesn't. But if you just take that blowout plug and you put it right there in that winterize connection, then it does go ahead and route that air through the system, starting with the pump. Also, if you don't have a winterize valve, but you have a tube coming from a winterize kit, such as like a Camco winterizing kit, I'm going to put a picture of one up here. You know, it's just a tube. You can use a couple of connectors to accomplish the same thing. So remember, all you need is a cutoff at the plumbing system and an air connector on a hose. And so like if you already have that winterization kit and you don't have the inlet, then what you're going to want, instead of like an actual blowout plug, what I found was the easiest when I was just at the hardware store figuring out how I could do this. It was actually just a regular air connector, a quick connector on the male end that just fits the air compressor hose that you have, as well as you're going to need a hose barb connector that just has the same, I think it's a 3/8 threaded end, where you can just put that quick connector right straight on there, and then boom, your system's done. So after you have a way to connect the air to the intake of the pump, you have to remember to be careful and cut the pressure down, because it could theoretically mess up the plumbing or the diaphragm of the pump if the pressure was too high. I usually personally use like 20 to 30 psi if I'm not using Lippert Floe when I'm using the air compressor. You know, you got to remember the normal water pressure that you have on these is like 50 to 60, so 20 to 30 is not going to do anything. And if you have it bumped up just a little bit, it's going to help that water get out faster, and it's going to be an easier process for you. Another quick upgrade that I'm just about to make, I've actually not made it yet, it's in the mail right now, but I'm trying to get this video done and out to you. So I'm going to link a video to this project up here whenever I get it done. But I actually had a member of an RV group that I'm in. He really said that this was a great product, and I'd never heard of it. You know, one of the biggest issues if you winterize frequently is getting that dadgum anode rod back in there if you got a Suburban water heater. And so it can be an issue because it's kind of long, it's like 9 inches long, and so it's heavy on the back end, and you got to kind of counteract that and push it up while you're trying to screw it in. And that can be kind of difficult because there's no real way to hold this very basic socket end while you're trying to push it in there. And so these guys apparently come up with this quick disconnect system. Now it's a little bit pricey, I'll tell you that, but for somebody that winterizes a lot, I think that it may be useful. Personally, you know, I'm going to get one. I did reach out to them. They didn't answer my email. I just went ahead and ordered one with my own money. So I'm going to do a review on that for you guys. And like I say, whenever I have that done, I'm going to link it down in the description and put it up in the corner here. But essentially, it's supposed to be, you know, after you get it installed the first time, you're not going to need any tools to put that anode rod in and out, and it's supposed to go in and out a lot easier. So we'll see how that works, and I have pretty high hopes for it, but I'll pass that along to you whenever I get more information on it. While we're talking about the anode rod, I do want to say that I do something a little bit different than most people. I usually, after I drain the water tank, I put the anode rod back in right then, because I left it out for a couple of months one time, and when I did that, I had a little bit of rust build up on the threads, and it wouldn't go back in very well. And so I actually had to get a 3/4 inch tap I got a set of those. I'll put in the description down there if you have any issues with that. I'll put the tap set that I got, because I got a whole set from Amazon and they had like 5 taps in it. It was actually just as cheap as ordering 1 tap, so I just went ahead and got the set. You know, they're just cheap, but you put a little bit of WD-40 on there, and then you just start, you know, putting it in the hole there, and you want to be really careful that you're not cross-threading it, because it can really mess your threads up if it's not straight. But just run that tap through there, and then I never had any issues with the anode rod just screwing right back in the way it's supposed to. But because of that, I do personally, after I drain the tank, I always put the anode rod back in, because there's no water in the tank, nothing's going to freeze, nothing's going to hurt. You know, traditionally people leave it out. I don't feel that it offers that much more security by having it out when the tank's already drained and doesn't have any water in it. So let's go through and take a look at how this whole process would look like if you're going to winterize the way that I personally am trying to teach you how, in order to winterize and save your pump and everything. So we're going to go through this step by step. A lot of this footage is from my previous videos that I did, because I already had footage of everything, but I'm going to show you the updated ways that I'm doing it, and I'm going to tell you that right now, okay? So I always start by trying to turn off the water heater a few hours ahead of time, because you know, you just don't want to burn your hands when you take the anode rod out. But then I go back whenever I'm getting ready to do this, and I open the water drain to the fresh water tank if I have any water in there. And that's just a side note for you. If you're camping in the wintertime, it's freezing, you don't have to have a heated water hose. Just use your tank. If you got an enclosed underbelly, you're probably going to be good unless you're in extreme cold. And especially if you have like a winter system where you got tank heaters and stuff, you won't have any issues at all with your water tank. So just fill your water tank up every couple days, and you don't have to get a heated water hose and mess with all that stuff. I think the only reason to do that is if you live in one full time, truthfully. So I open that fresh water drain to start draining the tank, and then I go up to the water heater bypass and I turn that on. It's important to remember to flip that outside switch of that water heater. And for those of you that don't know, that switch is only there for one reason, and that's to protect your electric heating element. If you drain that tank and then you turn the hot water on electric, it's going to pop that heating element. So just by turning it off outside, that prevents you from accidentally going in on the next trip, turning it on, and there not being any water in there and you forgetting. So that's the only reason that that's there. It seems kind of confusing to start with, but it's pretty simple once you understand it. So then you're going to want to drain the water heater, and for that you're going to need a 1 1/16 inch socket. So you're going to use that to remove the anode rod on our Suburban water heater at least. And you know, if you have another brand that may not have an anode rod, it just may have a plug there. But Suburban water heaters do have the anode rods. Now the water, as soon as you pull that out, it's going to start squirting out of that hole. So you're going to be wanting to stand over on the side unless you want to get drenched in the middle of winter, which is usually cold when you're doing this. I usually open the pressure release valve at the top. That way it just lets the water drain out a little bit faster. And then for the time being, I either place that anode rod on the edge of the bezel right before putting the cover back on, or like I say, I go ahead and put it back in. But I want to get all the water I can out of that tank first. Another side note to using your camper in the winter times, I always recommend leaving your water heater on at night when it's real cold, or even during the day if it's real cold. I don't know how big of an issue it usually is, but I'll say that the camper that I had originally had a lot of water damage in it, and the water damage, now I'll say that it wasn't winterized and somebody just left it there, but the water damage was actually caused by the hot water tank exploding from freezing water. And so to protect against that, I doubt that that would happen if you had just the heat on in the camper, but you got to remember that one side of that water heater tank is exposed to the outside. I mean, there's some insulation on it, but you have to remember that, you know, it's pretty cold outside. And so to me, it's just worth the extra effort just to leave that on, and just to give you a little bit more security that the water's not going to freeze inside that tank. This is especially true if you're on electric and you have a hookup, so you might as well just leave it on at night, because you're not going to be using any other electricity hardly, and you know, it's just going to offer some extra protection. So after this is when I'd go ahead and hook the air compressor up and set it at the correct pressure. Now, one of the things that I have that you may need, it depends. If you're just using a regular air compressor and you have it available where you can just turn the pressure down, then that's fine. The air compressor that I usually use for this is actually mounted inside my camper, and it's right in the center of my storage, and so I don't actually take it out. I have a line that runs to both sides. If you're interested in that, there'll be a video down in the description, okay? But essentially, because of that, I leave the air pressure high because I like to have it be able to air up my tires. But I actually have an external and inline regulator where I can turn that pressure down. The one that I got was actually with a winterized kit from Viair, so I feel that it's pretty good quality. But it goes inline and just clips into the hose there, and that way it regulates the pressure for you so you don't have to worry about it. Because like I say, you don't want to use more than 20-30 pounds of pressure when you do this. Now, the next thing that I usually do is I open the fresh water drains on the bottom of the camper. I moved mine over to the side because I do this a lot. So essentially, when I first started doing this, they were like right in the center of the camper. I never even drained them because I figured that it probably wouldn't be that much of an issue if I got the rest of the water out of the system. But I do like it better to drain them, and so I moved them over to the side just with some elbows, and I wrapped the PEX tubing under there with some pipe insulation stuff so they won't freeze. And so that way I have access to it from the side of the camper. So that's the first thing that I do, is I drain all the water from the both hot water line and cold water line on those fresh water drains. Then I move to the outdoor faucets. We have a outdoor hose in my wet bay, as well as a shower in the front of the camper, an outdoor shower. So I go to both of those and I'll do the cold and let everything out until some air comes out, and then I'll do the hot and I'll let all the water out and all the air out. And so then I'll move from the hose on the back side to the outdoor shower on the front side and repeat the process. Now, it is important to note that you're not going to get every single drip of water out of the system, but essentially, you're just going to have a little bit of moisture left, and it's not going to be enough in order to freeze and make an issue. And so I usually do go through and do this process twice just to get all the moisture I can out of the system, especially if I'm using the Floe, because the air pressure is a little bit lower and it doesn't do quite as good of a job at misting all of that moisture out. But like I say, it's going to take more than a few drops of water in that faucet to cause you an issue. So the next thing I do is go to my kitchen sink and I drain the hot water line and the cold water line. And then I do the bathroom sink, hot water line, cold water line. And then I'll do like the shower, hot water line, cold water line. And then I'll do the toilet where I depress the flush valve until all the water's out of there. And then I start back at the outside at the fresh water drains, and I do that again, and then I do the hose again, and the outdoor shower again, and the kitchen sink again, and the bathroom sink again, and the shower again, and the toilet again. So after I do all that twice, what the correct method is, I don't always do this, and it might bite me one day, but the correct method and what I try to do is get a little bit of RV antifreeze and put down in my traps and my sinks in the shower, and that way it gets a little bit down there to protect the sewer pipe in case there's some water in there, which there should be in the trap. That's the whole reason that the trap's there, but it'll just protect that. So that's a pretty important point, but like I say, I don't always do it, to tell you the truth. Now, whenever you get done with this, you have one more step that you have to do, because we didn't hook that blowout plug into the city water inlet. So that's going to become your weak point now. So your weak point before, when you used that, was the pump, but now your weak point is that city water inlet. So you have two options. You can take that blowout plug and you can put it in there, but then you're going to have just a little bit of water in order to get everything out as best you could, and you're going to have to go through and do everything again. But you don't have to do that. So all you have to do with this is you have to take like a little screwdriver or a key or something and go that city water inlet and kind of flick out the filter that's in there, the screen filter, and then you're going to see the one-way valve in there. All you got to do is take your finger and push that in. It's going to squirt what little bit of water's in there right back out at you. So you want to stay over to the side, but it's going to come out. Then you're going to be good to go. You're not going to have any issues unless it's extreme cold. And then truthfully, I still think that the RV antifreeze gives you a little bit more protection. I don't personally, a lot of people that use the RV antifreeze do the air system first and then the antifreeze. I don't really understand the mindset with that. And I say use one or the other. They say that it may save them a little bit of antifreeze by using the air first because it doesn't mix in with the water. But as soon as you see it coming out of the sink, you're going to turn it off anyway. And you're just looking for the color change. And so I don't really think it saves that much, but that's just my opinion. All this is just my opinion. I'm just telling you how I do it, and it's working well for me so far. So if you got any tips, leave them down in the comments. Let me know, and we'll talk about it. If you got any questions about anything, let me know. I will say that there's a couple of things that I'm not sure about because I don't have this stuff. One's going to be like your water filters, because I don't have a water filter here. One's going to be like if you have a household fridge and you got an ice maker, how to clear that line. I'm not sure because I never did that before. And the last one's going to be like a clothes washer. And so, like I said, I don't have one of those, so I don't know anything about that either. But, this for your basic camper setup, this is what's going to do it for you. And it's probably going to be the easiest way, the cheapest way, and the most simple way in the long run. But like I say, if you got any comments or suggestions, leave them down below. And I'll let you know about that quick disconnect anode rod. I think their website's called qdanode.com. But I'll let you know about that whenever I get it and get that all worked up and put in. So I hope you guys have a great time, a great week. Thanks for following us. Thanks for following our adventure. If you hadn't, hit that subscribe button down below if this video helped you. And have a great day.